Welcome to the January 21st, 2025 Planning Board meeting. My name is Steve Webster. I'm the Vice Chair, sitting in for Doug Breskin. I'd like to introduce my board members that are present. Vaughn Dugan to my left, Peter Goodwin, Roger Murray, Kathy Barnard, Brad Harriman with the Selectmen, and Julie Jacobs. Welcome, everyone. Before I get into the agenda, the Belknap Landscaping project will not be heard tonight, so if there's anyone here for that, we will not be here heard. So just want to let you know right up front on that. Okay. First item on the agenda is a zoning amendment public hearing for a petition article to amend Chapter 175, Part 1, Article 17, and Chapter 175, Part 1, Article 14, Section 175-91. A petition zoning amendment warrant article to amend Chapter 175, 1, Article 27 of the Wolfeboro Ordinance and Bylaws to remove the absolute restriction on drive-through restaurants and their permitting their construction and operation on lots consisting of at least 1 acre. Changes the definition of restaurant, quote, carryout, quote, to read as follows. A commercial establishment open to the general public, which by design of physical facilities or by service or packaging procedures permits or encourages the purchase of prepared, ready-to-eat foods intended to be consumed either on or off the premises. Restaurant drive-thrus are permitted only on lots with a minimum of 1 acre of land and are prohibited on any lot consisting of less than 1 acre. Petition zoning amendment article to amend Chapter 175, Part 1, Article 16, Section 175-91 of the Wolfeboro Ordinances and Bylaws to add, quote, restaurants, comma, carryout, quote, under Section E as an additional permitted use for commercial C1 Central Business District. Is there anyone here to speak for this warrant? Hearing none, we'll move along with...
Well, wait, might want to see public ones. Yeah.
Right. We'll move along with opening the public hearing for any comments on this article.
Ask me to vote.
Excuse me, and before you start, I'd like to appoint Julie as an alternate, if she will accept.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn on the mic. Take your head.
Now?
Yes, yes, good.
Hello. Oh, the power of the microphone. Ann Blodgett. I think I've been to 3 public hearings on this in the past, and I think the town's voted against it 3 times in my recent history. And I remember everybody in the room at the last public hearing. Everybody had prepared comments and spoke against it. So I don't want that to go, I want that to be taken into consideration, that those people probably still feel the same way. And maybe they're not here tonight because they hope that this will not come up again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
And we have plenty of restaurants that I would rather, now Suzanne's going to talk about her favorite restaurants.
Suzanne Ryan. Is the wording new at the end of this about the 1 acre? Was that on the last one?
Yeah, yes, it was.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you're all going to be insulted at what I say, but It isn't meant to be insulting. If I had more faith in the enforcement, the regulations, and site visit and site requirements, then maybe it would be something that could fly. But because we don't support our ordinances with enforcement, for sure, I can't support it.
Are you talking about the restaurants, the drive-through restaurants?
Drive-through.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to take site review if it passes.
This is a petition warrant article, it's not one from us. Petition
said-
warrant article, I did.
Yeah, it's a
Hi,
petition
Suzanne.
warrant.
This is a petition warrant article, nothing that we did.
If it, I'm Julie, I said if it passes, it's going to take site review. I don't have confidence in your site review.
Yeah, what else?
Hello, Ann Donati, Forest Road, and I did have a couple comments.
You'll
but-
need to get closer to your
Oh,
mic.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
A couple comments. Forgive my ignorance, but what is Commercial District C1 Central Business District? Is that one little section somewhere, or is it anything that's commercial?
It's downtown.
Okay. All right. So, I'm fairly new to town, but is it the same people bringing up this request? Or is it different individuals each time? I don't need to know the names, but if they've been told twice or 3 times, why bringing it up again? I know you
Well,
won't be able to
well,
answer
it's
that,
a petition warrant article, so whoever signed the petition,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that any one of us has really looked back to
Right.
see if it's the same people signing or not.
it's not the same people, but who's the person's idea that's running around getting the signatures? Is it the same person?
It's a group of 37 people.
Got it?
Yeah.
So 37 people got together, or one person got it and said, hey, I want to put this back out there,
One person,
but we don't know, we don't get to know who, I don't know, I'm just asking the
I'm not sure if
question.
we're even allowed to know, are we, once that petition warrant article gets filed?
Is this-
It's not on any of the paperwork.
No? Like who asked for it in the past? Who asked for it, like in the past? Yes.
You don't have to know who the one person is.
Yeah, okay.
You know, but you can surmise anybody that has 1 acre
Oh,
of
I
land
get that.
downtown
I get that.
could be the person.
I get that.
They don't know.
Okay.
They can surmise who it is.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And then the other thing is, the businesses and restaurants are hurting for help, so if you put in another restaurant, like where are these workers going to come from too? That's my opinion. You know, dishwashers, bussers, usually high school kids work at these places. So if they don't want to work at the other restaurants, where would the help from these drive-throughs come from? And I suspect that if something is in a business district or residential business / residential, you can put one of these restaurants in even like next to people's homes if there is an acre of land?
Can you speak to that, Rob?
no.
Or does it
no,
have to strictly be
This is
commercial?
just in the C1 district.
Okay, strictly commercial.
You could also put one in anywhere a carry-out restaurant is a permitted use, which in addition to the C1 district is the Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District, which is the area out by Wolfeboro Falls, just up to the intersection with 109A. The Bay Street Limited Business District, which runs down Bay Street. And the Center Street Route 28 Mixed-Use Business District, which is where what used to be Westlake is, and
Yep.
the very intersection with 109 out in Wolfeboro Center. So
Got
they
it.
could be put in there if this passes.
Okay. All right, and then one other idea I had, which is why not, if someone wants one of these drive-through restaurants, why not just do it on a case-by-case basis as opposed to having like a broad brush, anyone can put in one of these restaurants, like have a law in the books. That's just a suggestion. And they can petition the town and let people say, okay, you know, this is what I want, will people agree to it? Because it's clear who wants to have it instead of just having anybody apply and say, I want to build a McDonald's here.
So that is what the variance process is for. That's another way you would be able to go around the zoning, that we are the board responsible for changing the zoning or proposing new things and adjusting the zoning. So there's always that avenue. This hasn't come to us that way ever.
Okay. All right, well, that was just my other thought, that why have something on the books for, and have like a free-for-all? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm against it.
Anyone else? Discussion among the board? Comments?
I think the last few times that this is similar, if not exactly the same worded amendment has come before us, we have not wanted to recommend it to the public.
And I think the last time, I think that there were comments that was an unfair method, that we kept not recommending this, and, you know, how do we know what the public wants? And we had a public forum, and the predominant sentiment that we received from the public then was, don't do it. And there's no limit to the number of times that a warrant article can come to us, just like a legal battle.
I think the voters have shown they do not want this. I think, in addition, it would allow these restaurants in places that really aren't suitable for them. So I would like to make a motion that we not recommend Chapter 175, Part 1, Article 27, and Chapter 175, Part 1, Article 14, Section 175-91.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next on the agenda is the short-term rentals. To add an article to regulate short-term rentals.
Do you want me to read it? I can read it.
So the short-term rentals, to add an article to regulate short-term rentals. The purpose of this article is to regulate short-term rentals for the benefit of homeowners and visitors to our community, to promote health and safety, to minimize neighborhood disruption, and to promote the general welfare of the community. Applicability of other regulations. Where specific development requirements are addressed in this article, they shall supersede any other town regulation. Where specific development requirements are not addressed in this article, the most stringent of any other town regulation shall apply. Zoning districts in which permitted, short-term rentals shall be permitted in any conditional use permit in all zoning districts. Criteria for approval. Where permitted by conditional use permits, a short-term rental shall comply with the following. As part of the approval process and every 2 years thereafter, the dwelling unit must pass an inspection by the Wolfeboro Fire and Rescue Department and by the Code Enforcement Officer, which shall include the following. 1, Smoke and carbon monoxide detectors shall meet New Hampshire Fire Code and New Hampshire State Building Code requirements. 2, all doors and windows designed to provide emergency escape must be in compliance with applicable codes. 3, no space shall be used as sleeping area unless there are 2 means of escape with properly sized windows or doors conforming to the New Hampshire State Fire Code and New Hampshire State Building Code. 4, a functional fire extinguisher shall be visibly installed in any kitchen area. Item B, the maximum number of occupants shall be 2 per bedroom plus 2 additional occupants. The number of bedrooms to be determined based upon New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services approved septic design or the Town of Wolfeboro Assessing Department records, whichever is fewer. For properties, C, for properties not served by town sewer, any subsurface sewage system serving the property shall be properly functioning and shall have a New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services approval number for the number of bedrooms. For systems without such an approval, an evaluation by a New Hampshire septic system evaluator must be performed and a current NHDES approval obtained for a system to be installed in the event of system failure. D, the property must be in compliance with the current parking requirements of Article 22, off-street parking and loading requirements of the Town of Wolfeboro zoning ordinance. All parking shall be on-site and in designated parking areas. E, the property owner shall submit proof of current New Hampshire room and meals tax license identification number. F, the property owner or designated property manager shall provide contact information and shall be available to address any issues arising during rental periods. That ends the article.
Would you like me to address it?
Yes.
We held a public forum on short-term rentals on October 15th. We also held a public hearing on this proposed warrant article in December, and based on those meetings, we made some changes, the first of which was originally we were going to require a special exception, and now it's permitted by conditional use permit, which is issued by the planning board, they would be allowed everywhere in town, every zoning district. We made some changes to the criteria for approval to take into account input we received from the fire department and the codes officer. We made the change that originally we allowed 2 occupants per bedroom. We changed that to add 2 additional occupants in addition to 2 per bedroom. We also put in a specific reference to where the parking standards appear. We included a new section. The property owner or designated property manager shall provide contact information and shall be available to address any issues arising during rental periods. And then what was on the original one, we had G and H, which addressed enforcement. Because this is a zoning ordinance, it must be enforced in accordance with the zoning enforcement statutes, which, if anybody's keeping track, is RSA 676, 17, 17C, and 17B and 17C. So basically, if there's a violation, the person would be contacted by the code officer, a citation issued, and then that person would need to come into compliance, and if that did not happen, then an enforcement action could be undertaken.
Any further discussion at the board level? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing now. Is there anyone here that is just, would like to speak on this short-term rental proposal? Suzanne?
Suzanne Ryan. Can you explain why you took out G, the approval of short-term rentals shall be valid for 2 years, why you don't have a time?
We put that into A under criteria for approval. So it now reads as part of the approval process and every 2 years thereafter.
Oh, okay, thank you, I see that, okay. All right, so I have strong feelings about that. I have mixed feelings about allowing and having an ordinance for it. That aside, the strong feeling I have is that it's all over town. I don't think that it should be all over town. I think that the board knows this town well enough to where the areas are that are most conducive to where short-term rentals would be applicable. And to do it all over town, you're setting yourself up for it to be voted down. I think that more work should have been done on deciding where are the most suitable places and start with that and not all over town. That being said, you know how I'm voting, but that being said, I'm having trouble with integrating this into the zoning ordinance. I see 175, and then it doesn't tell me where it's going to go, and I know that you don't have to put that down at this time, but it would be nice to know where it's going to fall into the zoning ordinance booklet. And the reason I ask is because you've got that, once again, conditional use permit rather than appeal to the zoning board. And the reason I was pushing to try and have it go to the zoning board for if somebody's denied is that for the sake of an applicant, does anybody know where this goes other than Roger? If you were to deny my application for a short-term rental, how do I appeal that?
Do you want me to answer?
Not Roger. No, he knows.
What did you get denied for? Fire code?
What's that?
What did you get denied for? Fire code?
Where did I get the what?
What was your denial? Why were you denied?
I'm denied a short-term rental. Why?
Yeah, but why? Why were you denied?
Because I don't have parking for it. So where do I go to appeal your decision?
Probably nowhere on that, because you just don't have the parking to fit the bill, so
Obviously, you don't know the answer. So the answer is, the way you've got it written, is it has to go to Superior Court under 676-5 Roman 3. And it does this applicant an injustice, because if you appeal, if you get denied without the conditional use permit in there, they just appeal to the zoning board for like $50 for an application. So it's really not fair to the applicant that they have to go to court if you deny them. And I imagine there'll be times that you would deny them. There'll be reasons.
But on the other hand, Suzanne, if it was a fire code, all you'd have to do is bring it up to code and get inspected again.
No, Julie, you're not following.
Okay.
So anyway, I'd ask that you go back to the way you had it. And the other reason is that conditional use permit 674-21-2, and you might want to go and read this article. It's called Look Before You Leap. And it was written by attorney Christine Johnson, who happens to be the ZBA attorney. So it caught my eye. And the administrating and process of a conditional use permit provision must be laid out in detail to avoid due process claims. If a person has to guess at the meaning and applicability and has to guess in the meaning on and the applicability, you must convey in clear writing to the average person. And I believe, and this I would ask Roger to clarify for me, I believe that this falls under innovative land use, conditional use permit.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. So there again, I go to innovative land use, and we currently have, accessory dwelling units, innovative land use. We have the one that Kathy likes about the conservation
District.
subdivision. And a couple like that. But then I go to look up the process for, how to appeal it and what to do and so forth, and there's not much written. So you don't have the second part that goes with this. And I just think that you just haven't laid out the detail of how to go about applying the conditional use permit provision to this temporary housing, or whatever it's called, short-term housing. So I just think it's not ready. I think it's premature, and I think you should wait for a planner to get on board. I'm sure you've given this to your attorney, but...
Well, one of the reasons we made it a conditional use permit was because on October 15th, we had a room full of people, and one of their comments is, why are you making us go through this additional step? And they suggested a conditional use permit, and we made that change. And if you get denied your permit for a short-term rental for parking, you can apply to the Board of Adjustment for a variance. And those things are not spelled out in the ordinance. The process is spelled out in the statutes, and that's what you follow.
It's not spelled out in this.
No, and if you look at the rest of the zoning ordinance, it's not spelled out there either. And this will go in the ordinance as a separate section, like the multifamily, like the conservation subdivision, like the wetlands.
But you haven't got it written. You're asking us to vote on this without that.
It's going in as a standalone section of the ordinance.
It's not, you haven't got a draft of it.
I've got a draft right in front of me here.
You haven't proposed it to the public.
This?
No, not the short-term rental, the part about the conditional use, the criteria for the conditional use.
We had a public hearing on that. We made changes to the conditional use permit in order to include short-term rentals in that, or to include any other use allowed in the zoning ordinance by conditional use permit. Because prior to that, the conditional use permit only applied to accessory dwelling units.
I don't see it in our ordinance. I only could find it under the ones I just named. At any rate,
Conditional use, it's section 175-215 is the conditional use permit.
at any rate, I would say that all zoning districts, it should not be allowed. And I don't think I think it's not a burden on the applicant to go to the ZBA. I don't see it as an extra step. I'm saying if somebody gets denied, they go to Superior Court. No ifs, ands about that. That's fact, that's law.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any other comments? Come up.
Hi, my name is Linda Gagne. I don't have any comments, I just have some questions. because I just listened to that, to all the reading of it for the first time and heard it. And I'm just wondering, is there a difference between, like, when somebody has a rental versus a short-term rental?
A short-term rental is a rental for
Well, I know what a short-term rental is, and you probably have it
30 days or
defined.
less.
Right, okay, so you have it defined, but do you require a similar step for people who just rent their homes for longer than 30 days?
No.
No.
So so you're honing in on just these folks and not the other folks who rent for 2 months, not 90 days, half a year, or a year. You don't require carbon monoxide detectors, you don't require fire alarms, you don't require 2 people to a room, but just for the short-term folks. Is that what you're saying?
The rental of a single family has to comply with whatever codes apply to them.
Any zoning, right?
But in single-family dwellings are a permitted use in virtually every district in town, and that is what the zoning does.
Right, but you don't go in. My point is, I guess, when I just sat there as a new resident in town, and I'm coming to this meeting just because I'm trying to learn more about the town, so I listened to what you read, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, it seems like a lot of arduous, like I'm trying to figure out, first of all, what's the point fully, and it seems like it's a pushback against short-term rentals and all of these measures that those folks would have to go through. But also, it just seems, when just looking at rentals, or even somebody owning a home, I mean, I think everybody should have a carbon monoxide detector, but you're not enforcing that for everybody, just for these folks. And so I would think that if I were one of these folks, I'd be concerned about how you're treating them versus other, what do you call it? What are the folks homeowners who rent their houses for longer periods? It just seems somewhat discriminatory, just listening to it.
Well, the people who are doing short-term rentals, some of them, it's gone on. People have been doing it in town for years. And people with a summer house, they rent it for 2 weeks, they'll pay the taxes. But many of these people, or out-of-state companies, are coming here. They're running a business in a residential district. We do not hear the complaints about people who are renting for a longer period of time. If you go out and you look at things, there was a short-term rental in a house that slept 36. That's the maximum size for a hotel and motel in town. I think it's 50 rooms. There was one for a one-bedroom, one-bath house that slept 12.
Yeah, no, you don't have to convince me. Like, I understand there's problems with it. I'm just saying, I'm just sitting there listening, reading it, and these are the questions that I had.
But
It seemed to me just that I just gave my
I would
feedback.
suggest that there's a difference in the market for a short-term rental, as in people rent the thing, they bring up 20 people for a 6-bedroom house and have a great weekend. I would suggest that's not the case of someone who's renting for more than a month.
Yeah.
They're not going to have that many people in there, and so therefore these regulations really are for that short period of time when people are going to strain the systems. And some of the issues we're dealing with are the septic systems around the town.
So then have a septic system. I just didn't understand, like, what does the fire department have to do with it? And going in to see if they have a carbon monoxide.
Well, so
It
you've
just
missed,
seems like really heavy on the town.
you've missed a lot of meetings because we
Yes, I
have.
have.
Yeah, so we have gone over this and we are trying to solve some problems and some complaints that people are concerned about the safety for these renters that are short-term, making sure it's up to speed, concerned about parking, parties, noise, all sorts of things. So it's been a very long process, and I'm sorry that you're just coming on board. But
And I would also suggest that, you know, if there is no smoke detector there and you're there for a month or you're there for 3 months, you may talk to your landlord about it. However, that's not possible if you're coming up for a 3-day stay. You aren't going to get the detectors put in there and things like that.
And one other point is this applies going forward. So basically, somebody is starting a business or a change of use from basically residential, and there's a definition in the New Hampshire of statutes about a residence, you know, with the intent you come in with intent to make that your home or your place of living. And we are trying to regulate it going forward, basically because of complaints we've heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making those points, some of them that I was going to make. And,
Could you get a little closer to the mic, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Not giving away my age, but I'm sure many of you have lived through the 70s, 80s, and have...
Can we get you to give us your name?
Oh, Mary Jane Shelton. So I want to clarify and make sure that I understand that this short-term rental is only for stays shorter than 30 days. Is that correct? Okay. Have you thought about the fact that what you're encouraging is for people to, well, first, I think that it's discrimination to, we have a lot of tourists who come up to drop their kids off at camp, or they can only get a week off from work, or they can't afford the rent for a whole month. And so therefore, we're going to cut out that market. And that market probably gives quite a bit of business to restaurants, buying T-shirts, doing the tourist things, and everything else. And so we are changing kind of the feel of this because we do not have enough hotels to accommodate those people. So we are basically sending them elsewhere because, Roger, you can shake your head, but let me finish, okay? We don't. I've looked at the hotels. I've tried to book hotels in the area, and in the high season, they're full. So there is a need for other housing. There's also a need for workforce housing, which I totally agree. So when you restrict it to less than 30 days, you then encourage, if somebody buys this house as a retirement investment, and they're not going to retire for 5 years, but they need to cover some of the taxes. And they're very, as I was before I moved up here, cognizant of who I rented to, very careful, and rented it to people I knew or families or whatever who were very respectful. So I don't know how many people are having problems in town. I've come to the other meetings like a couple of years ago. But I think back to my youth and I go, I can remember when my friends and I, one person would rent the house on the Jersey Shore, but every weekend, another group of us came in, and it was party central. You're doing the same thing up here, is that you're basically encouraging people to rent to a single entity or maybe 2 people who sign the lease, and they never go over the occupancy, but they rotate people coming up. And there's a different group coming through all the time. So I don't know that you've thought that through. So besides the income that it's going to affect for the local economy, because if a family comes up for a long weekend or a week, They're going to take their kids out for Baileys, they're going to buy souvenirs, they're going to, they're going to spend more time eating out than cooking. You get a group in who can afford a $10,000, well, it's more than $10,000 for a month up here. That's not going to be the same income. You're not going to get that same revenue. And you are under the assumption that those people are going to be very quiet, respectful, everything else. I'm not sure who's telling you that, but you have to be aware there's two sides to it. And I don't know the numbers. I know some of the neighborhoods that have had problems, and I don't know if there's another way to control, if that's the minority, to control that. Is it the majority? And another point that was just brought up is you have it all over town. Well, what if you own a condo? Are you subject to the same terms? You have to rent that condo in town for a month? There are condos in town, there are businesses, and they're parking on the street, which, as far as I know, is not allowed, overnight parking. And I've worked across the street from them and seen, it gets turned over every weekend. But because it's in a business district, nobody's had a problem with it. So I guess I'm wondering what we're doing. And then you've got timeshares, Windrift, down on Lake Street. There's no owner there, there's nobody there. And those people can rent those. There's so many holes in this that I just don't understand why it's particularly, pinpointing less than 30 days. Because that doesn't mean that those renters are the disruptive ones. But they're the ones that can afford and want to come to Wolfeboro with their kids, or bring them up for camp, drop them off. They're not going to rent for a month. They may be coming from who knows where. I just think that it's a little short-sighted to restrict it that way. Besides, the fact is that as a landlord trying to find somebody who is going to rent your house for a month, that's tough. And the other thing is, if you are just supplementing, like say you're, only going to rent for a couple of weeks in the summer, you're telling them they can't do it.
Can I just suggest that what we're proposing is not a prohibition on short-term rentals?
No, but you're making them jump.
You need to have a safe place for the people. You also need to have parking on the street, on site, so that you're not disrupting the neighbors.
Yes.
And so therefore, we're not prohibiting short-term rentals.
Correct.
And so therefore, it seems as if you're saying we're making
No.
it so it's not allowed. That's what I'm
I'm
hearing
sorry,
from you.
that's not what I meant.
That's what I'm hearing from you.
Okay.
And I don't agree with that particular statement, because this regulation is not in that direction.
Okay, I'm not saying that. It's just that you're making those people, you're making it harder for them, and you're making them jump through hoops. Don't you care about the safety for the people who rent for 30 days? Don't you care about the septic system or the smoke detectors and everything else? I mean, why are you only worried about that group and not everyone? I mean, you've got people all over town that are renting places. Are you making them get a conditional permit? Are you making them get inspections? I think that's a huge burden on the town. I mean, I think there's a compromise somewhere, but you can't say that, the house that rents for weekends is in worse shape than the house that rents for a month. I went and visited a family of friends of mine from Pennsylvania who rented a house for a month last year, and the condition of that house was terrible. But nobody's checking on them. So where do you draw the line? It's just, this arbitrary less than 30 days.
Are you suggesting the town should adopt a landlord-tenant ordinance and also a septic ordinance?
I'm just saying, how can you choose one group and not extend it to all, or just revisit it? And then, what do we do about workforce housing? What if, they need to rent a house for several employees for less than a month?
They can do it.
I mean, for more than a month, sorry.
They can do it.
Yes.
Right.
You can rent for any length. You can rent one of the house for a night. You can rent it for a week. You can rent it for 3 months. You can rent it for 6 months. You can rent it for a year. This is not restricting.
It's not restricting, it's just making them get conditional permits. And as I said, some of the ones that are in town don't have off-street parking. So are you going to enforce that? And who is going to enforce that?
We cannot do anything with the existing short-term rentals. They are grandfathered in. This is associated with the new
I thought that
ones.
was taken out.
No, it is the only way that we can deal with it.
Okay, all right. But what are your thoughts on encouraging group rentals? That this may, in turn, do that, and the effect on tourism?
As long as you don't exceed the occupant limit, you can rent. You can rent it. You have a 4-bedroom house, you can rent to 10 people.
I wasn't talking about the occupancy numbers. I was talking about the hurdles that have to be jumped through, and the effect on the, business in town, and, you're worried about the turnover. You're focusing short-term rentals because you think there's too many groups turning over, and what I'm saying is, you can rent your house for a month and you can have 5 groups come through there. So, anyways.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Bobby Budman. I just felt like I should come up here. I know you started clarifying on this. First of all, the state has regulations for long-term rentals. And so when there are landlords and they're renting out their place for a long period of time, there are a lot more state regulations in process. Things like they're working on lead pipes, other things. I did want to say that I appreciate the fact that if someone is renting out their space to someone on a short term, this is not getting rid of short-term rentals. It's just making sure that if there's a fire in the house, the people can get out safely. It's complying with some of the stuff that our inns and our hotels have to comply with right now. So I do appreciate that. I think if someone who is not normally living in a home should have access to understanding where a fire extinguisher might be if they start a fire in our own homes and in long-term rentals, you bring in your fire extinguishers. You know where those things are. So I just wanted to clarify after a couple comments that long-term rentals are looked at by the state differently when you have a family staying there. So I do appreciate this short-term rental contract that we're bringing forward. It is not denying in any way short-term rentals. It is just saying that if people come into your home and you are renting it out on a short-term basis, we are going to make sure that we are not backing up a septic system. We are making sure that we're not harming our town in any way with our water and our sewer. We all know that in our town is a very complex issue because we are putting capacity on that. I don't think if most people realize that our rooms and meals tax, we only made about $660,000 last year that we got back in our meals and rooms tax. our town does run off of our property taxes. So if you have someone in a short-term rental next to you and they're not paying into those meals and rooms tax, and you're paying a heavy burden of your taxation, that is not coming from that revenue that I think people sort of believe these meals and rooms tax are supporting our town. It's the neighbors, it's the people who are living in our homes here and our property taxes that are supporting it. So thank you for bringing this warrant article forward.
Your point about having the rooms and meals tax coming back to the state of Wolfeboro or town of Wolfeboro is an important one, and it may not be followed by all short-term rentals, but in the future, those people will have to have that number
Yes.
to pay those taxes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Suzanne?
I have a question. What am I missing here? I don't see a definition that says 30 days or less. Where does this 30 days come from?
That's a separate warrant article which we voted to move to the town warrant. And that reads,
Have you already had the public hearing on that?
yes.
Okay.
And that is the rental of any dwelling unit or portion thereof for an occupancy of less than 30 consecutive days. And we already voted to send that to town warrant.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, Ann Donati again, from Forest Road. Just a couple things. Is there maybe a suggestion on limiting the number of permits for short-term rentals for the town? Because I believe she mentioned, like, they're going to be, I mean, they can be anywhere. So, like, if you have one neighborhood, you know, can we limit how many STRs go in one neighborhood? Or like Hackney licenses, you know, that cities have for taxi cabs. We'll put 50 out there, and when they're gone, you have to wait for someone to give one up. That's one idea that I have thought about. And as far as renting something out for less than 30 days and her concern about different people coming in and out, I did read the Ossipee short-term rental ordinance, and they do put in that you can't sublease it to other people. It has to be by the person who is actually doing the short-term rental. Maybe that's something we would want to put in here. Let's see. Is there, I suggest or maybe recommend, can we have that the homeowner has some skin in the game, that you can't have an STR unless the homeowner has some presence in New Hampshire at that home for a certain amount of time during the year, as opposed to an absentee landlord. Ossipee also has a provision that if someone is fined and they ignore the fine, then they can, bring them to court. If they don't show up, they can, a warrant can be issued for their arrest so they can comply with the fine. And there's fines for, like, it states it's $1,000 a day and $1,000 every day that you don't comply.
There is an existing enforcement provision in the zoning ordinance, which I think imposes a $100 a day fine, with each day being a new violation.
Okay. But I just, I know people want to make some money off their homes, their vacation homes and everything, but I mean, I have a few in my neighborhood which are okay, but I just don't want this to be another Conway with drive-through restaurants and Airbnbs and people coming in and out of the neighborhood, renting my neighbor's house, you know, all summer long, and then the winter and fall. I just would prefer if we had some kind of limitation on how how many times they can be rented, or just having an absentee landlord if, in our residence, in our neighborhood. And if they're not there, wouldn't they be considered like a business in just a strictly residential neighborhood if the person who buys it and just has it in STR lives in Connecticut, they're strictly there just to make money. And it should be considered a business and not be in a residential neighborhood. So, just some thoughts.
There are facts and figures on ownership of short-term rentals that are available through the Business and Economic Development from the state. There are fewer than you might think that are out of state. There are quite a few in-state. I think that the basis of this short-term rental regulation is to, as Bobby mentioned, make it safe, and to make sure that the people that do come here, have the right experience, they're safe, and that we can make sure that they're run properly, and that we collect that taxes to support our efforts here. I think my board members would agree with me that we're not trying to totally restrict this so that it ruins, we're open, we're the oldest summer resort in America. We welcome people, and we still will. The existing people won't be subject to this. And I know that we've Roger especially has spent a lot of time reviewing others, Ossipee, Sunapee, Conway. There was a suit in Conway about this. So it's been very thoughtfully put together. So we do appreciate your comments, though, and your
Okay,
thoughts.
thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Blodgett. It's been 5 years of these meetings, maybe? Is that what I calculated? Vaughn, do you remember if it's been 5 years?
Since 1921.
Pre-pandemic, right? So I think we're talking about public safety, quiet enjoyment of one's own property. We're talking about the drain on housing that keeps coming up. Other towns around us have regulations, and if we don't, we become more saturated disproportionately. I think some of the people I've spoken with talk about the degradation of their neighborhoods, and that with transient constant turnover and noise and trash issues, it's not the neighborhood they moved into. I see this warrant article as a start. Obviously, enforcement and strengthening of noise and other ordinances is incredibly important. So this is not a one-off, and it's obviously not the ultimate solution for either side, but it's not a ban. And I agree with what Steve said, that if we're bringing people to our community as tourists, that we should have some standards of safety as we do in other areas of town. So again, I think from here, if this passes, it's incumbent on all of us to work on what points of enforcement need to be held to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you. Anyone else? No, there's the signal. All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing.
I think this has been a topic of discussion for quite some time. The board has spent a lot of time working on it this past year. And we either need to decide to go forward tonight or hold off on moving forward. And I would be in favor of proceeding, and I make a motion to move the short-term rental ordinance as proposed to town warrant.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, thank you. Approved.
And thank the audience for their comments. They're appreciated.
Appreciate it.
I want to make a comment on the bill now. The landscaping thing.
Yes, at the beginning of the hearing, the landscaping, Belknap landscaping site plan will not be heard tonight. So if there's anyone here that is waiting for that, as I mentioned before, that one will not be heard. The next one on the agenda.
Before we move on, I just have a couple of questions. This is a use permitted by special exception in that district, and I'm wondering whether when the initial approval was gained in 2004, whether a special exception was obtained and whether it would be sufficient to cover this expansion. And my second question is that for a contractor yard, which this is, you need to have,
So this has been postponed.
but I think this should be brought to their attention, that the setback shall be reserved as a vegetative buffer. The vegetative buffer naturally occurring planted shall be of sufficient density that the contractor's yard activities cannot be observed through the buffer at any time of the year. And in driving by, it seemed to me that more landscaping had been cleared than more recently.
Yes, they've done a review, and thank you for your comments, Roger. They've also got the New Hampshire DES alteration of terrain permits that have lapsed. So they've got some work to do, and I suspect they've set this aside for the time being in order to work on those items.
And they'll also be coming to the Technical Review Committee.
The TRC, correct.
So we can certainly bring up these issues at that time.
Thank you, Kathy. So the next on the agenda is Peter Ford, 16 to 18 Lanier Street, site plan review. The applicant is seeking a change in use in the form of an extended stay inn at the property located at 16 to 18 Lanier Street, former Hope House. The property is for sale and under contract. Peter Ford is the buyer. Shannon, the reviewer, has met with Peter, and he's here to present tonight. He's also been in front of the TRC with us.
I'm going to step down because Bayside Village Condominium Association is working on some amendments to its bylaws, and Peter and I are both unit owners in Bayside Village.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you for your time. I find it very appropriate that the previous discussion about short-term rentals was tonight, preceding my discussion about workforce housing. Certainly, short-term rentals, along with a number of other factors such as the cost of construction, all of which have affected the ability of people in the town of Wolfeboro to obtain any type of affordable housing, especially in the downtown core. The people who are doing most of the work in town, in restaurants, in various retail establishments, they need, for a lot of different reasons, to live in the downtown core, and that housing availability has been eroded year after year, and it's just not available any longer. And the property located at 1618 Lanier Street, it was a former mill building, is an amazing opportunity for the town to do some small part of alleviating that. It's 20,000 square feet. It is fully ADA compliant. It has an elevator. It meets all current life safety code. The cost of constructing such a building in the downtown of Wolfeboro would be astronomical with today's construction costs. So my proposal is to use that building as an interim or short-term workforce housing solution to provide housing for people who are coming to Wolfeboro for any period of time, a week, a month, 6 months, to work in the town. It's transitional in the sense that, you know, they will come here, they'll start working. It could be a seasonal job. But it gives them time to come here, live here, see if they like it here, and then try to find more permanent housing, either an apartment or a shared housing situation, or even to buy a house. That type of housing is just not available in the town of Wolfeboro. So again, I think it's a great opportunity for the town to develop that type of availability for workforce housing. There are a couple of challenges, obviously, you are aware, and the main challenge is the lack of parking. But I think that it is in the downtown, and you're just not going to find a building like this anywhere in downtown that has that potential. It's not going to have a huge parking lot associated with it. The area in Laner Street and Glendon Street has a lot of on-street parking that is not utilized. There's really no businesses left in that area. It abuts a town parking lot, and I just feel like it's an opportunity the town can't pass up to provide some availability for housing for workforce.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Peter, I see like on the third floor here where they had the smaller rooms before. Tell me what you're thinking, because I'm just seeing like one kitchen here and a bunch of bedrooms. Is that the type of thing you're still thinking about, like dorms?
Right. So I'm kind of investigating what the options are for it. I think that right now it was a mill building, and then the Hope House Families in Transition went before the ZBA, and they got it approved for 7 bedrooms, and it has 1 commercial kitchen. So it's kind of a hotel in that sense. The rooms do not have separate cooking facilities. They're good size. They have full bathrooms, but they don't have separate. They have one commercial kitchen in there. So technically, my proposal is to run it as an inn, to do short-term rentals out of there, again, from 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, to give people a place to live while they are absorbed into the existing housing stock. Right now, it has those 7 rooms, and I'm gotten a little bit of different information from the town about what those are actually currently entitled as. That's one of the things that I'm trying to find out in the purpose of coming here. But in order to be economically feasible, because you're trying to balance the cost of acquiring and maintaining the building versus the cost to the end user, who would be the worker. So in order to be financially viable, it's not going to work with 7 rooms. So what I would propose is I would like to increase the density of the rooms. Basically, it is an extended stay hotel, to answer your question directly. So I think that around 20 rooms would allow me to provide the short-term interim housing at a cost that most people in entry-level or just above entry-level jobs can afford in the town of Wolfeboro.
So that would be on floors 2 and 3?
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3 for 20.
Right. The third floor is pretty much built out right now.
Yeah.
And we would just kind of emulate that on the first and second floor.
So no more offices at all?
I don't think so. Well, again, it's an economic consideration. Also, of course, as most everybody is aware, office buildings are not really in demand right now in most places, and especially not in Wolfeboro.
Well, we, of course, had you at the TRC, and the elephant in the room, if you will, was the parking situation. We do have some infrastructure problems with the sewer there that we'd have to speak with the DPW about. Those are mechanical things, but I think in the process you need to go to the ZBA to get a variance on the parking. I think that's probably the path.
Right.
Anyone else?
Does anybody know how many offices there used to be?
So at one point, there was a gym downstairs. Another point, there was a dental office. I think the second floor
kindergarten.
was a dance studio at one point.
And the kindergarten was there? Yeah.
Used to be an auto parts store in there too.
No, I meant just this last bit.
Yeah, I was saying back in
Back
part
in
of
the
the
day,
history of
yeah.
it.
I was just thinking, you said there's a problem with the sewer there. There were a lot of different entities going on all at the same time. They didn't have a shared bathroom, did they? Just saying.
Yeah, I suggested that Mr. Ford come here just to get sort of a sense from the planning board as to whether they feel this is a good idea or not. So that's...
I think it's kind of innovative, actually.
Well, it is innovative, and it's, there's no one that's going to argue with you that the workforce housing is a huge part of the housing shortage, and it hurts everyone's business. Whether or not you could, we figure you've got a half a dozen parking spaces there, you probably need 35 or 40, I would think, to support what you're doing, maybe 2 per unit kind of thing. Anyone talk about the public parking down in the back there? I know it's probably filled right up in the summertime.
Oh, boat trailers, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yes, summertime would be busy down there, but I know we have, in past applications, if the public or municipal lot was within, I believe it was, don't quote me on this, but I think it was around 500 feet.
500.
They were allowed to utilize, for calculation purposes, parking spaces for their proposal. So,
It seems to me if there used to be a dentist and a gym or a dance studio and Hope House up above, that there was a presumption that they would be using some of the town's parking.
Right.
So what would the next step be to,
Kind of sounds
For
like
Peter
the
to move
parking
forward.
bit's going to be the hang-up, in my mind.
And you also need to talk to the Public Works Director. I don't know if you've had a chance to do that or not, but...
yes, actually, we briefly spoke about it during a TRC meeting that you attended, and most recently on the last one that we had. And we could look into that with Steve Randall and see what could happen with the sewer part of it. We've got the community center next door too, which we're still struggling with what to do with that. So that could come into play partially on that sewer issue. But,
Okay, you had also talked about having a staff person on site at all times.
Yes, yeah, that would be, again, it would be technically run as an inn.
Right.
For a number of different reasons, but obviously, we would have a staff person there at all times. It would be a check-in desk. The goal, of course, would be to support workforce housing, but we're not going to say how long you can stay or how long you can't stay. But it would definitely have an on-site person. And I think that, it's in the C1 business district, and so there's a couple of issues. One, of course, is if it was a 200-seat restaurant, would it require the parking? I don't believe it would, right? So it would take a lot more parking requirement to put a restaurant in there, but because in the zoning, it's housing, it's making it much more difficult to put something in there. And I'm only talking about 20 rooms, and realistically, probably a good proportion, I would say a third, based on my experience, will not have cars. And it's not going to be 2 people per room. It's most likely going to be 1 person per room. So we're probably talking about 15 cars that would need to be absorbed in order to provide 20 housing units for workforce housing. There's a lot of parking on Glendon Street and Laner Street, and the town parking lot is right behind. And then I think it's a little bit bigger discussion about what is the purpose of the town parking. Certainly a lot of different people use it. You have a lot of tourists that come in and use it. You have a lot of people who are fishing in the lake and they put their trailers there. But what could be more important about using the town parking than people who are living and working in our community? How can you say that tourists are more important than people that live here? So I think that it is important to consider the availability of off-site parking in the general area around this building. But the reality is it's a 20,000 square foot building in downtown Wolfeboro, fully ADA compliant, like I mentioned. there has to be something that we can do with this to alleviate the workforce housing. Yes, there are challenges, but we need to overcome those challenges because we're not going to find another building like this that's going to provide the opportunity for us to tackle this. We've been talking about workforce housing here for years, and there's been a lot of money invested in a lot of things in town, and they're great things, the Nick and the Abenaki, and I hear, you know, a lot of things that are being done for recreation, but where have we made the investment in workforce housing? We've talked about it a lot. Here's an opportunity to do it, but it's not going to be easy because it does not conform to current zoning code. And I'm very hesitant to spend a tremendous amount of money because unfortunately, unlike the planning board, which I can come to and have this type of discussion, in order to go before the ZBA, I have to have a full set of plans, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So I'm trying to determine, is there backing for something like this in the town? Because I really do not want to put a lot of effort into it and a lot of money expenditure to just be shot down at the ZBA, to be honest with you. So that's what I'm trying to gauge by coming here. I know it's not your decision, but you guys certainly have been here for a long time, addressed a lot of situations, and I value your input. Thank you.
So how do you propose to make sure that it is workforce housing, people who are working downtown and not just another kind of a hotel?
Well, that's the way we're going to run it.
Like a
Is as
hotel?
workforce housing. As you're probably aware, I own the Lake Wentworth Inn, and the business model there, the only one that's economically viable, in the summertime, we're sold out. It's tremendous desire for people to come here, and I agree that we probably don't have enough hotel rooms in Wolfeboro, which helps explain why so much housing is getting eaten up by short-term rentals. Whole nother topic. I had to bite my tongue during that discussion because people that come into the town buy apartment buildings and then take it and turn them into short-term housing for economic gain. I kind of have a problem with that. But at the Lake Wentworth Inn, we rent out the rooms over the summer, and then the rest of the year we do short-term housing for visiting nurses, construction people, lots of members of the community, people that are working in restaurants and shops. But the problem is that during the summer, they have to move out. With only a few exceptions, we have a few people that live there longer term. They have to move out because in order to be economically viable, we need that higher income from the short, you know, the hotel. But this will be a year-round. This will be for people who want to come in and do summer rentals, you know, restaurants that need summer staff. We're not going to necessarily do a litmus test about whether you're qualified as a member of the community, but for the most part, if you're going to come here for a short period of time, you're going to be working in town, you're going to be a contractor, you're going to be building houses, you're going to be working for landscapers, you're going to be working in restaurants, you're going to be working at Hunters, or you just might be moving to town, but you need someplace to live for a short period of time.
Well, thank you, Peter. You were invited to garner public support, and I think that you're garnering it.
Yeah, I think Peter wants.
It's a very noble thing you're trying to do, and I think that obviously it has to be done within the constraints of our zoning and our everything else, but I can understand why you want to do it, and it also would be good for the town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, thank you for your
Thank you
input.
for coming.
And your information and your background.
Okay, moving on. Okay, next on the item is discussion items, natural resources inventory map project. Peter, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, and it seems to be moving forward. We ended up having maps delivered to us basically the last week in December, and we now have a Lenore Clark, who is in sort of running this operation and doing a very good job, has now, based on committee work that we did last week, a number of edits that really should be done. Some of them are associated with unfragmented lands, things like that. But I think that that's going to be moving forward, and I think that we may have the maps delivered to us reasonably quickly, as in another 2 or 3 weeks. There is now descriptions of what is in the maps and how the maps were derived. At the same time, it may end up being that ultimately the Conservation Commission and others are going to try to put together some information or commentary on what we really do with these maps and how we end up keeping our lakes and streams and everything else running the right way. So that's going to be another step, and it's a question of whether we end up having that done professionally or done in-house. I have talked to one person who suggested that there was one town person on the one conservation commissioner head chair who did the whole thing himself. So it is a possibility of having members of the Conservation Commission and a few others put together the commentary, which will help to have people, or will allow people to understand what these maps say and how we use them.
Peter, where are they going to be found?
They can't be found anywhere right now. They'll be on the town website. They aren't
In what
quite
department?
finished.
Are they going to be like in the planning department?
Huh?
Will they be located in the planning
In the
department?
planning department, yes.
Okay.
Because the natural resource inventory is actually part of the master plan, so it is part of what the planning board has. So it will be in the planning board. It turns out that there was initially some issues that the file size was so large that it was very hard for computers to deal with, but they've all been cut down, so now we're doing well.
Compress.
As in 300 megabytes is a big file.
Thank you, Peter. Next on the agenda is Shorefront Residential District Ordinance Review, specific to town Wolfeboro shoreline permit applications. Vaughn, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, it has come to my attention, and I've brought it up a few times, and I think that there is a difficulty of interpreting and enforcing the regulations that we adopted back, what was the date? 3/12/2024. And I'm not trying to rewrite anything, but I thought I would take a shot at making a list of what the requirements are for new lots, lot redevelopment, pre-existing non-conforming structures, and other criteria such as woodland buffer. So I went through, and from my recollection, and also Leanne has very kindly provided us with a whole bunch of meeting notes from our discussions so that we could reference what our intentions were if we have any questions. So what you have in front of you is something that I worked up, and I separated it into new lots and what the requirements are depending on impervious coverage. And then lot development, and then different criteria of impervious coverage, again, has different criteria. And I don't know how much time you all spent reading this and examining whether or not you agreed with it. But I think going forward, it would be helpful to the planning department to have us be very clear about what we intend or intended when we wrote this ordinance. Because there are a bunch of things that are getting kicked into the ZBA just because the strictest possible way of interpreting these is being used in some cases, and I don't think where we intended to. So I can read through what I came up with, but I think you have it in front of you. So for new lots, And of course, remember, there are different criteria. There's the reference line. There is an area within 50 feet of the reference line that is divvied up into 25-foot segments, and there's a point score assigned to those things. And then there's another section between that 50-foot setback to the lakes or rivers, streams, whatever, and 150 feet. You have to have a certain amount of unaltered area, and that depends upon the size of your lot. There are two different criteria for different lot sizes. And then finally, there is, pre-existing non-conforming, and then I think what we were looking for when we wrote this was an improvement. Show us an improvement over what you have. Let's say you're over 30%. Bring it backwards in more pervious coverage, or, show how it's set back further from the lake. And then you'd have to explain, give a narrative letter to say why it's more nearly conforming, showing the footprints, the proposed and the prior. And then it needed to be brought into greater conformity with the standards of the ordinance. And then on top of those sort of three different kinds of lots, there's the woodland buffer on all lots. And if it's under a half acre, it needs 25% unaltered in that area, and 50% if it's over a half acre. So this is sort of a bullet list of what I think we were talking about requiring, just to make it clear that we all agree and enforcement can agree. I'm not intending to reinvent anything, but I think there was a reaction to very loose enforcement for a while, and it's come the other way around. But I think what we should do is try and get it back to what we intended.
So you're calling this kind of like a cheat sheet?
I'm proposing that we make sure that what I thought it was is what we think it is, or if it's something different, but we need to give some direction, I think, because it came from us, or else everything's going to end up at the zoning board for a variance, and I don't think that that's what we intended.
Can you tell me what you think isn't being properly interpreted?
Well, actually, Randy here has a few examples.
Please.
Yeah.
Before Randy speaks, can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Can I just,
Your microphone.
hold on, Randy, please. At the beginning of this meeting, I handed out, Shanna was in the office today, and knowing that this was going to be on the agenda, she had prepared, actually back in August, for Suzanne Ryan and Audrey Klein. It was a question, they had a question regarding the shoreline permit, which I didn't even realize that this existed. So she wanted me to give this to you. And I guess it was a question about how she interprets the ordinance. I just wanted to make sure that you read this as part of this discussion.
We haven't read it, we just got it.
I know that. I just wanted to make sure that was, so that you understand how she, so you're going to hear from, you heard from Vaughn, you're going to hear from Randy, but I just wanted to make sure you have, this is how she interprets it, so that you understand that's where she's coming from.
Thank you.
So you have all the.
Thank you. Randy Tatro, Randy Tatro as a resident and someone who works with this quite often. I was on the Conservation Commission when the original ones were brought up, dealt with the state one since 2008. Wolfeboro decided not to adopt the shoreline rules in 2012 that the state was putting forth, formed their own committee and came up with a set of shoreline rules that have been modified off and on as we've gone. But generally, in my opinion, the intent all along, even as Vaughn says, there's been different people who have reviewed it, from Rob to Matt to Tavis to now Shanna. and it's not an easy job. You have existing features plans, you have proposed plans, you have another plan that overlays it over, you got the application, you're looking at square footages and so forth. So different interpretations are, understandable. But I think generally, as Vaughn's trying to ascertain with the board, what is your intent on certain situations? And I think where it's become problematic with the different interpretations is the intent of the regulations, in my opinion, isn't necessarily being followed as it has consistently and according to the existing application that's with the town all along. Now, the town doesn't require some of the stuff the state requires. The non-conforming letter is something that is the same, but they don't require pictures and so forth, and a picture's worth 1,000 words when looking at these things. I think generally the problem has arisen from the threshold of the impervious coverage of, in the state's requirements, 30%, and in the town's requirements, 20%. It was always considered that if you were over that threshold, and I think your regulations say for lots that do not exceed 20%, if you're over that threshold, then you were required to come up with the point score on the grids, make your unaltered to the required percentage. If you were not above that threshold, then you weren't required to do either of those things, but you were mandated to not make them any less. And the application is consistent with that. The application, if you have an unaltered area of, say, 1,000 square feet, but according to your lot size, large or small, as Vaughn would say, whether it's a half acre from 0 to 150, or whether it's over a half acre from 0 to 150, depending on how big the lot is, 25% for a small lot and 50% for a large lot. If you have 1,000 square feet of unaltered, that's all you have on some of these developed lots, as you can kind of understand. You put that number down, you put the required number down, and then the next section says, put the smaller of the two. And the reason for that is the same reason it's like that with the state, which is that's what they're grandfathered into, that's what they have, and as long as they don't go less than that, that's the requirement. It's being interpreted differently now, that you have to bring it up to those percentages. Why is that problematic? On reconstruction lots, it's very problematic. The 100-foot band is where everything takes place, and that's where the unaltered is figured out. But I think generally that's been the process all the way through. On new lots or virgin lots or whatever we want to call them, which there aren't many, although I have 2 right now, obviously that would be an easier thing to do, because there's nothing on there already. So even if they've cleared it, you should be able to revegetate. The only time that we've been forced, or other consultants who I obviously know and talk to, is if we tried to make something less. Like if we had an unaltered area in the 100-foot band, and there was no way, we needed the area because of the way the house was shaped or whatever, we had to revegetate that square footage in another area within the 100-foot band, and we had to meet the point score in the unaltered regulations. The problem kind of is we've gone that way, different consultants, with that theory, and people spend a lot of time and effort with us, with architects, with landscape architects or whoever, to get to a certain point based on that understanding of the criteria. If it is mandated that you have to bring up, no matter what your percentage is, whether you're under 20 or you have 30 and you're going less, the same or less, if it's mandated that you have to bring the point score up on all the grids and the percentage of unaltered up to the percentage, that's not going to work on the reconstruction lots. It's just, if you think about it and you know how some of the waterfront is developed, there's no way that you're going to get 25-point grid score on a house that's in the 50 and has a patio in the front of it by the lake. And then if you consider that most of the developments in the 100-foot band with the access driveway and everything else, the percentage on a lot that's 150 feet wide, that's got to go 25% of that unaltered. That's why it was set up that way to begin with. There's a lot of different variables. The sites are a lot different. I think and I had a conversation with Shannon about it. She feels that she's reading the new regulations correctly. I don't deny, maybe. All I can say is it doesn't match the application, and it doesn't match when it says lots over 20%. It says if you're under 20%, you don't have to do that. Now, a lot of the ones that people are working with take a lot that's 30%, do pervious paving or stormwater management things to get it down under 20% for that specific reason. But that's what you guys want. I mean, that's what it says, more nearly conforming. It's not just structures, it's impervious. And that's what it says in that paragraph of the ordinance, because I was around when you guys came up with it. So the discussion is just based on, was that your intent? I mean, even since some of the old minutes because I got a copy of the minutes too, and the minutes on January 19th, the minutes on January 19th that she passed out, page 1 at the bottom of the page, Steve Webster said he believed the draft was well written and that it offers applicants consideration for maintaining or decreasing impervious coverage as an incentive. And that's true. That's what it does if it goes by the application. And then Brad said something like, same thing, he believes that the draft should be kept, and he agrees that it provides an incentive to maintain or decrease coverage with regard to the improvement projects. He goes on to say that may potentially limit shorefront improvements. He's correct, it will, But that's really the difference in the theory. The difference is if you go over the 20% threshold, you're required to do those things, including engineered stormwater management and so forth. If you're between 15 and 20%, you have to have one stormwater feature, whether it's drip edge or rain garden, pervious paving, or whatever that is. And I'll tell you that most of the developed site have to do that in order to get their percentage to a point where they're not mandated to plant trees in front of in front of the house, and they don't have the room to make the unaltered work. The percentage this isn't there. On new lots, or then that's a different story, because you're starting with more of a blank sheet, even though some of them are already cut, So I just wanted to be here to tell you that was kind of the discussion. I got various ones that most of them it'll affect quite greatly if the interpretation is the way it currently is, and it will. Sending this type of thing to the zoning board of adjustment under the threshold of, a hardship or something like that, I don't think is where you want it to go. But maybe it is, and that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Ray.
Yep.
And we have an example of a case. Was this given for this reason? That went to the okay. No, all right. That's something else. All right.
I don't have any.
Yeah, so I don't know how things have been going with the ZBA, what they've been denying things, or have they not heard anything yet? Yeah. But I would suggest that, we each go through, and I did an outline of what I think it says when I read through the argument, or the article, ordinance, sorry. I did it by new lot redevelopment, pre-existing non-conforming structures that would be in a setback. It's another thing. And then woodland buffer is it's almost a separate issue. It's an overlay issue on the lot. And I wrote down the criteria, for instance, impervious coverage below 15%. We said you don't need an engineered stormwater management plan. If it's between 50 and 20%, in the ordinance it says you don't need a management plan by an engineer, but you need one stormwater control measure. If you go over 20%, now you need an engineered stormwater plan and a maintenance plan that gets, reviewed every 5 years. So we have these different levels of criteria for different things. That's new lots. Lot redevelopment is similar, not quite the same. With the trees, it's different because you might not have trees. Whereas if you have a lot that either you've cleared without permission or is fully treed, then the top layer of criteria, it's very simple. As Randy said, it's easy to apply because you've got a fresh lot. But when you have structures already, we have to look at the impervious first, and then trees, and then the woodland buffer or unaltered area. It's 3 different things. So I think it would be useful to go through at least what I wrote, and you want a copy? You got one? Okay. And just think whether or not you agree that's what it says. I'm not trying to invent something new. I'm trying to say this is what I thought we meant. And I do this all the time, so I'm used to it. What's that?
Comments here before we discuss this? Seems like we should. I mean, we just got this tonight. I have not had a chance to read it, and I'd like to read it in.
And the idea here is to be of help. Clearly there's some lack of clarity.
Yeah, there was one thing I wanted to mention. There was a discussion on changing the application as it exists. And although it could be a little bit clearer, I think, as far as the unaltered part is definitely taken into account as part of that, which says you have to maintain it. You can't make it any worse. In the application, so I don't think the application needs to be changed. And I really do not saying the ordinance needs to be changed. Maybe you guys will think differently.
You're saying the ordinance does or does not need to be changed?
No, the application that you fill out.
Yeah, I think there was a discussion that the application need to be revised according to the new interpretation. All I'm trying to say is I don't think it does. I mean, could it be a little more precise? Maybe, but it works. It's the first one you guys developed, and it's the one everybody's used even since March. That have gone in a certain direction. And from my selfish perspective, to change that is quite a deal. Maybe that's what you guys will decide. They won't be able to do it certain ways, and it will be forced to the ZBA if that's the way it's determined. I don't think it needs to be. I think it still follows your intent, interpreted the way it was by previous planners. But take a look at it and see what you think.
So it is all new, probably it takes a lot of digesting, but what we have in our packet is my outline. You may or may not agree that's what it says, but you also have a lot of meeting notes to remind yourself of what we talked about. So hopefully the thing we intended is what we result in, as far as direction whether we change an application or how it should be interpreted. But there's some confusion right now.
I'd like to look at an application so I have a better idea what you,
regardless of whether it has changes in.
Has this come up in more than one case, or multiple cases, or?
It's almost every case.
How that works.
It's not every case?
In every case?
No, not every case.
I'm just trying to get an
Yeah, no.
understanding of what we're...
There's not every case. I believe there's 4 shoreline permits that have been referred to the ZBA. I don't know if all of those applicants are going to opt to go to the ZBA.
But it hasn't been that long. And they will continue to go there if we don't sort this out.
Yeah, okay, I'm not trying to prolong it, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that we need a
I'm not
couple minutes to look at this and understand it. And maybe we could put it over until the next meeting.
And so the very important thing is the threshold. You know, if at 20%, or greater, the things that are outlined in the ordinance are required, and that's always been the case. The difference is if you're under 20%, which is what it says in the ordinance, are those same things required no matter what percentage you're at? I don't believe that's true. But, you know, have a look at it. I don't think, that's not the way it's been treated all along. You know, as you know, I'm old enough to have seen all that. And we've worked with it, you know. The state has taken the position, not that you need to follow the state, but the state has taken the position on existing reconstruction situations that they mandate that you keep everything that's there and you can't get into it as well. It's just that their threshold is 30% and not 20. So, you know, in cases in Wolfeboro, you got to look at the 20 versus the 30, and they're all in that sweet spot, as you know. So you've got to make adjustments to your plan to make sure that you can be nearly more conforming, as the term is, somehow, whether it's eliminating part of your impervious by structure size, by eliminating it by you know, pervious pavement or other stormwater management features that, like, you know, pervious patios, or however it is you do it, to get that percentage, you know, to meet the qualification so that you don't have to do something that you can't do. I think it's still, while being redundant, is what we're after, which is infiltration of the warm groundwater, you know, stopping this pervious runoff, and it's already in there. It's already in there. You know, so I just think now that the literal interpretation of it is that it says right at the beginning, you got to do those grids, and you got to bring that unaltered up to the percentage, is being interpreted that way, and you know, most sites can't do that. Most all sites will have a real difficult time with that. So I don't think that's why you guys did it the way you did in the first place.
Well,
But that's just my opinion, you know.
No, and I did read through the meeting notes. We spent a lot of time discussing different levels. You know, when you need a stormwater management plan, it was about having to hire an engineer or not. So if you don't remember, there's information in the notes.
Right, I remember
Yeah.
pretty clearly.
So do we want to revisit this?
But, I mean, the thing I'm a little concerned about is, number one, I think we need to look at this and then come back and talk about it at the
Yeah.
next meeting.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yeah. That's the,
and, you know,
Yes,
both
of course.
Brad and I are on Wolfeboro Waters. We've heard a lot of issues about waterfront development, and And Rich Massey also had a lot of input into this regulation. I mean, it didn't all...
He comes loud and clear
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
notes,
right,
you'll see.
Right, and I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that all those things are addressed, that's all.
This is really good strides on this issue.
Well, I think it needs clarification.
Yep.
Right.
Thank
for
you,
your input,
Randy.
Don't we basically want people to be able to read things and know what they're supposed to do?
Yeah.
Basically, that's what we're doing.
One of the problems with this is it's three different things. You know, it's the 50-foot near the water, it's the percentage coverage, and it's the unaltered area. So that there are three criteria, and it gets a little bit confounded. I think when we were working on this, we had a clear picture. I thought we did, but you know, interpretation didn't have the benefit of all of our talk.
Leanne, can you send us copies of the applications so that we can print them out and
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what would you like for the next meeting? You have a lot of information now. Would you like an example, like a copy of the application that is going to, was
might be
referred to
good.
the ZBA?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
would you like Shanna to, would you like Shanna's email to the applicant explaining why because she does inform the applicant as to her
Yeah.
But I rationale
I think
for
that
That's a
would,
good idea.
that would
Do you,
be a
or
good
should
idea.
we talk about what we intended?
Yeah.
Right.
I
Right,
think we
but
should
we-
talk about what we intended as a planning board. And the interpretation is causing the struggle right now, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So are you clear on what we want? We want a copy of an application that's
Yeah, I'm
been
clear,
denied?
yes, I'm clear on
along with
that. And then,
Shannon's comments?
at any time, would you like to speak with Shanna? I just, or
Well, I
do
think
you
we
just
should
want
talk
to
about what
first
we
talk
meant
about
first.
everything?
Yeah, I think we should look at it
Yeah.
and
Okay.
get the information.
Very good. Thank you. Good conversation. Next on the agenda is the 2025 work program. So we've got some ideas for consideration for the 2025 work program.
Well, I just had sort of gotten together things that I knew were pending that we hadn't really gotten to, which is what the information I sent to you folks
Did it-
yesterday.
Didn't we already add some of these, Kathy, to Doug's list? Doug had a list going already.
What was it?
Doug had a list started already of these things. I think some of the ones that you reiterated were already on the list.
Yeah, well,
And that could be,
yeah, there is a list, and we just need to get it all together so that,
get it updated so we have a
Right.
plan for the year.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Tavis had given us.
Yeah, Leanne and Doug and I had a meeting last week and jotted down some ideas, and Kathy's added on to that, along with,
And-
Doug didn't have his list with him, but
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Doug hasn't
That's what we're trying to do.
submitted his
And
list to me
Roger
yet.
Roger, you had something on ADUs?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll consolidate the list.
Okay,
Doug,
get a whole list.
we will, yes. Doug has Doug has ideas. This was a list I compiled, and then I did speak with Roger. He wanted to speak to ADUs. And then Kathy, I believe, the only thing missing was the food truck definition, the definition of food truck. Was that the only thing missing
The
from
vending cart thing?
vending carts or vehicles.
the vending cart? And
Yeah, I mean, that came up, we
yeah,
approved one
but I think that was
without
the only thing
any
missing from this.
site plan or anything, and it just seems that needs a little more
Kathy,
work.
you just said we approved one. I don't remember that.
The what?
There's one now existing.
But we didn't approve any.
ZBA
Yeah.
CBA approved it.
You did.
But whatever, the bottom line is that it really needs a site plan if it's in the commercial district.
Well, and it needs a definition rather than what it says now is prohibited.
Yeah,
So, yeah, we need to
that's
look at that.
basically what I said, that the definition needs to be reviewed or something,
To
but
determine if changes should be made to clarify that food trucks are allowed. Yes.
since we've already allowed one in the C1 district, and that really needs to be clarified.
Good, so we'll consolidate the list and have it for, sent out.
I think Roger wanted to speak to the ADU.
Yeah, on the water and sewer hookup, there's the village residential, which mandates water and sewer hookup, which is on your memo, and then on Kathy's, there's 17583, which mandates water hookups. And those both.
Did I give the wrong site?
No, that's the purpose one.
Oh, yeah, the purpose, right, yeah.
And it's the, where it actually is mandated is 17583.
Okay. And the impact fees, we've had this report from a consultant for a while now. And it really does need to be followed up and action taken.
Also, there was discussion about getting the road construction regulations back on the table to review. There was additional work to be done on the regulation to be included in the discussion.
Right.
I would like to, before Brad makes good on his threat to leave us, I'd like to get his input on the regulations on just some of the construction stuff. And I think what I have here still is a 60-foot right-of-way, which I thought we had decided was not going anywhere. And whether if you get rid of the 60-foot right-of-way, which I am completely opposed to, whether these other figures need to be addressed at all on the, we also should get page numbers.
I also spoke with Steve Randall, I believe last week, about the road construction standards and asked if he recalls where the entire conversation was left, because I only found edits as of March of 2024, and I did find that document that you're referring to. He emailed me today and asked me to forward that document so that he could see, because he's been working on the road standards. And he said that his document is not what Tavis was working on, and what he has are not the same. So before Brad puts his eyes on it, I would recommend Steve coming in and having a conversation at a work session with the board and comparing the documents. He did send me his document, so I can forward that to the board.
Okay, because
That sounds like
But I'd like to invite Steve to speak to it. I don't, rather than just forwarding it to you to just look at.
Yeah, right, because the memo here from Tavis, let's see, with Public Works Director, yeah, okay, all right. It sort of looked like it was ready for a public hearing, but
No.
doesn't look like it was.
According to Steve, it is not.
Yeah, okay.
It is not.
So do you have a timeline on that? Did he come in the next week or so with that, or?
Well, the next meeting, we have 4 applications, and, well, we have 5 public hearings, one on a tree trimming on scenic roads, and then 3 boundary line adjustments, and the NIC's site plan review. So we could have Steve come in at the work session in February. They're back-to-back meetings because of the deliberative session on the 4th, so I could ask him if he could come in.
Okay.
Yeah, there's probably no hurry.
For February 18th, if that works with you guys.
Okay, so we're done discussing the 2025 work program.
Could I just say something about ADUs before somebody wonders what nefarious things we're up to? And that is back when the state mandated that you had to allow ADUs in all districts where you allowed a single-family residence. The town at the February 7th, 2017 town meeting passed an Article 2 which reads, "Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 1 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units as a permitted use by conditional use permit throughout the town in accordance with," and then put some other language underneath it. And when you look at the ordinance, accessory dwelling units are included as a permitted use in the shorefront residence district, the village residential district, the general residence district, the residential agricultural district, and the Cotton Mountain district, and in C1 in the Pine Hill district. They are not mentioned as a permitted use in the municipal watershed, the South Wolfeboro business, Bay Street business, and Wolfeboro Falls business. And when you look at where they are listed, in most cases, it cites the amendment I just read. So rather than, as Tavis at one point seemed to suggest, that we had to do a warrant article to put them in the missing districts, it seems to me we can just list them in those districts as permitted uses, because basically this warrant article says they're permitted there. And if there's any question about doing that, I would suggest we contact Laura and see if she agrees, and that will solve that one problem.
Good point.
Okay.
Yeah, why not? Contact her.
Yeah, and just approach it like a typo then.
Yeah.
Yep. Good, so nothing else on the 2025 work program?
No, but I do have one other item.
Okay.
The community TV presentations of the proposed warrant articles by the planning board. I've always done that with Rob, and then with Matt, and then Tavis, and so you folks need to do that.
Yeah, Doug has, we discussed that with Doug, and Doug will be doing that.
He's making arrangements with
yes.
Wolfeboro Community Television.
Yeah. Okay, so that's taken care
It's
of?
underway.
Yes.
Okay,
That's planned.
good.
Yep. Thank you. Informational items, planning board notices of decision.
They were in the packets.
Yep. The ZBA notices of decision, it's just informational, as I
Okay, I
informed.
found in my file, the December 17th, 2024 minutes. It says table to the next meeting.
And I think there was a packet that didn't have all the minutes in it.
Did we finally did that, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
they're gonna,
They were going to come up in February, I think you said.
they're all set to be on the February 11th agenda.
Okay.
Good, so those informational items were the notice of decisions and the ZBA notices of decisions. And of course, the minutes will be reviewed at the February 11th meeting. Any other informational items or discussions items? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Oh, wait a minute, what about public comment?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll open the floor to public comment.
Hi, Bobby Budman. I just have one quick comment. When Mr. Ford was up here and you were talking about parking, I just want to point out that, especially because workforce housing is so important in our community right now, those parking spots that would be filled, that the people who will live in this workforce housing are parking spots that would be filled by the very workers that Mr. Ford employs. So either way, those same people would be parking in those parking spots. They just would be parking overnight when we didn't need them anyway. They would already be being utilized for the employees to be at the restaurants. So hopefully we can go forward and start uplifting some more of this workforce housing in our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.